Hi, noble ones. Welcome back to the podcast. Hey, if you guys find yourself like getting triggered by other people a lot or judging other people a lot and it irritates you, I feel like that's a common theme these days with all the separation going on. And if you feel like that, then this episode is definitely for you. Today, we're going to talk about what I think is one of the most noble behaviors or practices we can do when it comes to our relationships with other people. And that is acceptance, accepting other people for who they are, where they're at, and the decisions and opinions that they have for themselves. So before we get into it, I just want to thank you all for being here. If you're returning, I truly appreciate you listening in and following the journey of this podcast and of the noble ones. And if you're here for the first time, thank you so much for being here and just being vulnerable and open to kind of understanding how our emotions and our stories throughout each day or throughout our lives really can impact us and how we can learn to grow through emotional awareness. So let's get into it. The reason this topic came up is because I just got back from vacation with my family, which was amazing. I got to spend a week with my mom and dad and my two adult sons. And as you guys all know, as amazing as it can be to be with family, because they tend to be some of our closest bonds and relationships, it's also challenging. I think especially the older we get, we're set in our ways and we live our own lives and, we all have our own methods for coping with things. So when you all come together and you're in a small space and now you've got to learn to play in the same sandbox, I guess, to get along. So acceptance was something that I kind of was observing throughout the week. And the funniest story, it just seems so simple and silly, but like I always say, I'm not immune to going through any of the things that I talk about. I feel like emotional awareness is the common theme with all my clients and everything that I teach, but it doesn't mean that I don't have to practice it as well. So we were on vacation and, we wanted to go to the store and get groceries so we could cook and have snacks in the house because my kids eat 24/7. And it just made sense to do that. Well, we didn't do it right out of the gate. We didn't land and go right to the grocery store. We just kind of, we're being leisurely, but it was that lingering like, oh God, I know we need to go to the store because, the kids are hungry all the time and it didn't make sense to keep eating out. So it was the end of maybe the second day and I was tired and I just took a shower and I'm just chilling. And then my dad's like up on the porch. He's like, all right, you ready to go? Let's, pack it up and go to the store. And immediately I just felt like this flood of irritation, like, God, why do we have to go right now? Like, I just want to sit down. Like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, why do I have to go? Do I have to go? And it was like I was throwing this own little inner tantrum, I guess, because it's not what I would do. It's I didn't understand why we had to go right at that moment. I wasn't being accepting of the fact that there were 4 other people involved, and it wasn't going to be my way. So this was kind of like the first example. And, I jumped into the car and it was palpable that I was irritated. And of course, my kids called me out on it. And so did my dad. He's like, well, don't be mad at me. And what I thought about was like, gosh, I could have been more aware and handled this really different. So acceptance was just this theme throughout the week that my kids, my mom, my dad, as we're trying to make plans and do different things, there was indecisiveness. There was, this inner talk of like, wait, why is he doing it like that? Or why do we have to do it that way? And just not being accepting. So that's what I kind of want to dig into today. And I think with everything that's going on, in the world, it happens on a collective level. There's so much separation right now. Like it's this way or it's that way. It's right or it's left. It's Democrat or Republican. It's this religion or that religion. There's so much of it. And I think if we could all truly, as individuals, learn to practice acceptance in our own lives of others, it would make a huge difference on a massive scale. So a few key things that I think about when it comes to acceptance is it's a mindful action. It's actually a choice to be more accepting of another person. But what it's not is it doesn't mean like you have to cave, you have to forego your boundaries, you have to just take something especially if it's in putting you in harm's way. It's just a mindful action to step back and respond with, okay, I can accept that they feel differently, or this is the right decision for them, because looking through their own lens, they have different reasons for why they're doing something. So I think acceptance is truly a behavior. It's a choice to accept other people. Because look, nobody has walked a single day in your shoes. And so how would you expect anyone to know how you feel or where you're coming from? Well, it's the same. You have to use that mindset when you're dealing with other people. So if someone's triggering you, if someone's not doing something the way that you might want them to be, why couldn't you take a step back and say, okay, well, I can see why that works better for them, why that would be a decision that they would make, or you might not even know, but you could just say, you know what, that's their decision. I respect that. I don't agree. I wouldn't do it that way, but I accept it. And then the other thing is, I think when we accept other people, it strengthens our own resilience and we get to practice our ability to deal with change. So I think a great example of this is, and everybody's done this in relationships, you know how it could be a boyfriend, girlfriend, parent, child, husband, wife. When you are uncomfortable dealing with change, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll project onto people, well, if they would do this, then I'd be happy, as if they're responsible for our happiness. And so we basically avoid change that we know is already within ourselves by projecting it onto other people. So by just accepting people for where they are, that allows us to look more inward and work on our own change and be more resilient to the fact that we're always going to come up against, situations where we don't agree with people, but they are fully entitled to their opinion, to their journey, to their experience, and we just need to practice its acceptance. And then the third key point is that I think most importantly is it improves our mental well-being. And that's what I'm all about, is how do we take emotions that are negative, that are heavy, that are dense, and do we get rid of them, or do we neutralize them so that we feel better, so that we experience more peace, more joy? And when you're not always focused on what other people are doing wrong or judging other people for, the way that they're doing things, you pull all that energy back to yourself. So essentially, stop worrying about what other people are doing and just accept them for who they are and where they're at. You'll feel a whole lot better too. So I want to talk about 5 things that I wrote down that I think we can do to practice being more accepting of other people. And going back to that funny story of just the grocery store, the first thing I wrote was emotional awareness. And I'm always going to say that first because I feel like that's literally like the theme of everything that I teach is about stepping into being aware and stepping into observation. So in that moment, instead of me going into my own little tantrum, what could I have done? It's like, oh God, like I feel frustrated. Why am I frustrated? Well, because I'm tired, because I don't want to go to the store right now. And that feeling is irritating me. And so what's that about? Well, it essentially is because I wasn't getting my way. I didn't want to go in that moment. They wanted to go. I actually needed to go because it was a whole compilation of things we had to get for recipes and whatnot. And I could have just said, okay, well, I'm frustrated, but that doesn't mean that I can't work through that. So it's being aware of what's being triggered, what's the underlying feeling, and then what's the belief? And the belief is, I want to do things my way. Well, I've been used to living on my own. My kids are grown. And it's like, now I'm in this space where, we're cohabitating with 4 other people. So it was just kind of taxing what I'm used to. I'm used to my own space, my own energy, do what I want when I want, and I wasn't in that situation. So I think just being more aware of what the trigger is when you're up against somebody's belief system that doesn't resonate with you, or can you just accept it? Can you say, okay, I appreciate, that that's how you feel, and I'm going to be accepting of it instead of being more in your own head about how it's supposed to be for you. The second thing is it's just simple. Just allow it. Just allow people to be who they're going to be. And, I can think of several situations in my life, because this was a common theme for me before I went through my whole journey of realizing that I wasn't really in touch with my emotions. What I was doing was always looking for other people or other situations to change to make me feel better. And in relationships specifically, again, like I said, it's always that if they would do this, then I'd be happy. If they would do that, then the relationship would be better. If they would do this, then that part of my job would go better. Instead of, they are who they are, I accept them for that, and then I get to make a choice about whether I want to move out of a relationship, stay in a relationship, do something different within my job. So again, accepting that other person and dealing with what's coming up within you. Allow people to be who they're going to be. Allow them to have their own experience, because again, they've been walking in a totally different pair of shoes their entire life. So no one's going to do it like you do it. And then the other thing about allowing is, I think we have to be really conscious of the negative self-talk. And it sounds like judgment. And look, it's human. We all do it, right? Let's say you're standing in line at the grocery store and you're just observing people, or you're at the airport. What are you really doing? We're watching people, but there's a talk track going in our head that's sort of analyzing or judging. And I think we need to be really careful about that, because it's energetic, right? It's a reflection sometimes of how we feel about ourselves. And then again, we're throwing out this judgment about somebody else, and we have no idea what they've been through. We have no idea why they are doing what they're doing at that moment. So can we just accept it and stop the negative self-talk and judgment? And I think the third thing, that has to do with allowing is really, who can you control? Nobody but you. So when you take that into account and you bring all the ownership back on yourself, it's like, okay, the only thing I can change in this situation is me. So if my dad just yelled down on the porch he wants to go to the store and I'm irritated, that's on me. That's not his fault. So I don't have a right to jump in the car and be, a frustrated little bitch and have that impact the rest of my family. So I needed to control me in that situation and my emotions. Which brings me to point number 3, which is I could have just communicated it, right? I could have just said, hey, Dad, could we go tomorrow morning? Like, that works out better for me. Or do you think you guys could handle it without me? Or I could have said, you know what? I'm frustrated. I don't really want to go right now, but give me 10 minutes to get dressed and get my shit together. I could have just communicated it, but instead I had all this emotion inside me, jump in the car, and everybody could feel it. It's so simple. And it's like, I don't know why, especially, I think with family, like, we don't want to disappoint people. And my family specifically, like, we didn't grow up with a lot of emotional awareness. So we didn't talk about our feelings and emotions, and the emotional unavailability was there because coming down from my grandparents to my parents, it just wasn't there. So I didn't get that either. So what we a lot of times do is everybody just sort of avoids or talks around. Nobody is direct in saying, you know what, I feel like this, or I need this emotionally. We tend to be more like indecisive and not say anything because we don't want to hurt each other. So communicate. And if you have the ability to notice that someone else is agitated, ask them, right? So if you flipped it around and I was yelling down at my dad going, hey man, let's go to the store. And he's sitting there drinking a beer and he just sort of looks at me. I'd be like, is this not a good time for you? Do you want to do it tomorrow? Or do you need a half hour? Like I could have asked questions, right? If I was emotionally aware, that something was bothering him. So communication. And then the fourth thing is, empathy. Put yourself in other people's shoes as a way to be more accepting. How do you know that the person that you're meeting for the first time and in your head you're kind of judging? Let's say you go to a dinner with a bunch of friends and they bring friends that you've never met before and they start talking and in your head you're like, wow, I don't like this guy, or I don't like that guy, or I don't like what he's saying. How do you know what they've been through? You don't know their traumas. You don't know their family history. You don't know their coping mechanisms, what they're protecting themselves from. And that's a really great way to be more accepting, is empathize. I wonder where that's coming from. I wonder why that guy is talking about money, or he's talking about like who he knows, and he's trying to connect through, stories about like how great he is. Well, that probably means he's insecure. So where did that come from? Probably something in his childhood where he wasn't recognized. So there's always a way to be more empathic and understand what people have gone through. Put yourself in their shoes. So my dad wanted to go to the store. He wanted to get it done. There were 4 other people in the house. Let's get the food. Let's get it going so we don't have to do it tomorrow. He was ready. He had the energy. He was ready to tackle it. Okay, I could have seen it from that perspective. And then, yes, empathy is also like just trying to see things from another person's point of view. And again, you don't have to always agree. It doesn't, have to cross a boundary, but you can still always just accept how somebody else feels. And then the fifth thing I wrote is look for the good. There's always good in a situation. It doesn't always surface at the beginning, but hey, like we got food, we got exactly what we needed. So, that night there were snacks. We got up in the morning. We were able to make breakfast. We were able to take stuff with us to the beach. We had dinner for the next night. Like we got it done. And what was great about that was we didn't wake up and have to go, oh, where do you guys want to go for breakfast? Or what should we do for lunch? We didn't have to go figure out where was the next restaurant we were going to go to. We could stay at the house, connect, be a family, spend more time together just by going to the store. So it's like there was good in it. And the funniest part was it ended up being such a great time. Like everything's in Spanish and we got there and just, it was a brand new supermarket. And so like all the rules that they had, we had to go to the pharmacy. They made us buy masks to put on to walk around. And then just the way the store was set up, you're trying to read ingredients in Spanish, talk to all the different people at the store. And it was just funny. We ended up having a really good time. It took us a long time, but it was a good, fun family bonding experience. And by the time we were done, it was like my whole energy had changed. And that's what really made me start to think about it. And throughout the rest of the vacation, just watching how we're all so different, and then also the people that we would meet, like, everybody's just coming from a really different perspective. So I think there's always good in expanding and seeing other people's points of view and just realizing that we don't have to all be the same, that there really isn't any separation. In my mind, I feel like we're all connected in some way and that there really isn't any coincidence in different experiences that you're manifesting in your life. Whether they're really good or they're difficult, they're meant to happen. And there always is room for growth. And growth can happen a lot of times through our most challenging relationships, which can be family relationships. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to practice acceptance. So let's just review 5 ways that you guys can practice emotional awareness. Understand like what's the trigger, What's the feeling that's associated with it? And what's that underlying belief that's making me not be accepting of that person right now? Allowance. Let them be who the hell they want to be. Let other people be in their lane, have their own journey, have their own beliefs and opinions. As long as it's not infringing on you or harming you, just allow it. It is what it is, right? Number 3, communicate. If you're feeling something that it feels like you're judging or you're not being accepting, ask a question or say how you feel. Ask for what you need emotionally. Communicate about it. It will help relationships so much when you just communicate it instead of keeping it in silently, having all that energy build up and then having it affect everyone around you when you just could have communicated and said how you felt. Empathy, just understand. Imagine like if you were to put a pair of sunglasses on and all of a sudden you're living the life of someone else. What would that feel like? How would it be to look at things through their eyes or walk a day in their shoes? Be empathic to other people's journeys and experiences and realize that that's why they do the things they do, behave the way they do, and make the decisions that they make. And then finally, look for the good. There always is good in a situation that causes discomfort when it comes to other people triggering you. There's something to learn. There's always an underlying a message that comes from the emotions that are coming out in you. And I think, I've said this before, but whenever we're dealing with other people, when there's an uncomfortable emotion, you have to understand that that's within you. The emotion's yours. So it doesn't matter what they say, what they do. There's something that's bothering you. It's your emotion that's coming up, and you've got to take a look at what that emotion is that's making you not be accepting of another person. So I hope that this gives you just a little bit more to think about in terms of how can we learn to get along better with other people? How can we make our relationships more easier and more peaceful and more cohesive? Acceptance. Accept other people for who they are and where they're at. So you guys, until next week, I just want to thank you so much again for being here, for subscribing to the podcast. Share it, leave a comment or a review so that I know what other topics you want to hear about. And in the near future, I actually am going to be starting to invite guests on. And I want to have other people share their stories that they've gone through around, emotional challenges, how they overcame them, and what they're doing to kind of go out and serve other people through what they're learning. So if there's anything specific you want to hear about, if you know anybody that has an amazing emotional journey, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to reach out and get them on the podcast. And you guys take care. I love you. Stay noble.